kings and queens. Welcome to Faith Helps Podcast, and I'm your host, Diamond Booth. And if you tuned in last week, thank you. And thank you for returning. I'm glad to see that I didn't scare you. But really, thank you for returning. And if this is your first time here, welcome. As I always say, you are in for a treat. Now, just as a disclaimer, please remember that this podcast does not replace actual therapy. In no way does listening to this podcast mean that you are receiving therapy. And if you are experiencing a mental health emergency or safety concerns of any sort, please call 911. Now, if you need assistance getting connected with a mental health provider and you're experiencing like financial disparities, you can go over to my nonprofit website, www.forthekingdominc.com. There you will find pro bono and sliding scale mental health resources and services and all types of other things. Okay, cool. All right, now that that's out the way, the title of this episode is Credentials Won't Silence Insecurities. Now, for those of you who are already familiar with me and have been following me for any type of period of time, you've probably heard that title before, probably very recently also, because it was just a couple months ago that I released a video. I did a live stream called Credentials Won't Silence Insecurities, and it's based off of something that happened at my internship site. So it probably sounds familiar, or if you didn't hear it from then, you probably saw it when I posted it on YouTube. But nevertheless, I'm resurrecting that video here, well, the content of it here, because I truly believe that the message God gave me then is the key to someone else's deliverance in this new year as we are making strides to be a better version of ourselves. All right, so I recognize that God spoke to me then, and that is still relevant now. In fact, I feel like now that we are in a new year, it is probably even more important to be reminded of this message that credentials won't silence your insecurities. Because this is the prime time when people are fixated on maximizing their potential and goals and bettering themselves and, you know, the whole new year, new me resolutions, which are not necessarily a bad thing. Let me say that. The New Year's resolutions are not a bad thing. The problem comes when we become so fixated on leveling up and on all these resolutions and these non-realistic goals that we deviate from the path that God laid before us. You know, we can become so invested in how we can do more of this and do more of that and lose sight of the things God actually told us to do. It is possible to get so caught up in doing that you stop being who it is that God called you to be. So just because you are busy doesn't mean you are being fruitful. If you are doing everything except what God told you to do, you are still being unfruitful and disobedient. And you know, it actually brings to mind the story of David and Nathan in 1 Chronicles 17. When David, he had like made up in his mind, his thoughtful, ambitious mind, that he was going to build a house for the Lord. And God was like, yeah, no. Literally that same night, God tells Nathan to tell David not to build the house. Specifically, it's verse, let me just go ahead and pull that up. Verse 4. He says, quote, "You are not the one to build me a house to dwell in. I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought Israel up out of Egypt to this day. I have moved from one tent site to another, from one dwelling place to another." End quote. All right, so I don't know how y'all read your Bible, but as for me, I insert a little bit of my own personality as I'm reading, because it says God made us in his image. So I read this like God was putting David in his whole place. Like, sir, I didn't ask you to do that. So take several seats. All right, David, cool. To keep it a buck with you, when I first heard this story, actually, I was thoroughly offended. And I was taken back because David was trying to do something nice. Granted, David had a lot of issues, if you know anything about his story. But we're not going to that part. But he was trying to do something nice and something sweet. He was trying to be thoughtful, and he wanted to show God how highly he thought of him. Why wouldn't God want that? Like, why would he tell him no? What I realized is that he was doing something with good intentions, but I hadn't realized that it didn't matter how nice and sweet or honorable it is that he was, trying to show recognition and give this like prestigious, display of love and reverence to God, because it wasn't what God instructed him to do. It wasn't what God assigned him to do. God didn't tell him to do it. So think about it this way, all right? I got an example for you. If your boss tells you, hey, Jen, we'll just say Jen. I can't think of a more unique name. Hey, Jen, I just need you to have these flyers printed out and on my desk by 8 p.m. today. Cool? Fast forward to 8 p.m. He comes and asks you, hey, Jen, where are the flyers I asked you to print? And you respond, well, I didn't print the flyers, but I vacuumed your office, redecorated the waiting room, changed a few light bulbs. I filled in some holes that were in the wall, and I filed away all the, old articles, and I cleared out your old desk that was in the waiting room. And I made you a new batch of coffee with extra marshmallows and a little bit of cinnamon and caramel drizzle. Baby, he is gonna look at you like you are crazy because he didn't ask you to do all that other stuff. He asked you to print the flyers and have them on his desk by 8 p.m. So everything you did, regardless of how nice and sweet and thoughtful you were in doing it, the bottom line is that it was unproductive because it wasn't what you were asked to do. So you actually wasted time. It was a waste of time because you didn't do what was asked of you and was expected of you. You missed the assignment that was given to you. And how many of us today are missing the assignments that are given to us? Like even right now, how many of us are still walking around procrastinating on something that God asked us to do 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago? Assignments you received decades ago, but you're wasting your time doing a bunch of other things that you think are nice and sweet and thoughtful and honorable and cute and prestigious and highly thoughtful and all this other stuff. Assignments from God aren't like assignments in school. It doesn't just get marked late or a few points deducted. No. When God assigns something to you, it has a sense of urgency connected to it. It is time sensitive because everything has a specific time and season. And because we are not God, we don't know the future. So we don't know the sensitivity of the time in which we need to fulfill that assignment. The importance of timing isn't a new concept though. So the world doesn't always connect it back to God, but timing is essential nonetheless. No one can argue that, period. And we've heard some of the biggest influencers and leaders of our world even emphasize the importance of timing and seasons. Even leaders and influencers who aren't necessarily Christian or profess God in any way. Importance of timing is always highlighted in their successes. Some of my personal favorites, the ones that have resonated highly with me, has been Denzel Washington, who talks a lot about timing and seasons. It's also one of the other firsts that come to mind is Pastor Stephanie Ike Okafor. Hope I said her name right. But she talks a lot about timing and seasons. And then there's also Tyler Perry and Devon Franklin and Yvonne Orji. I was just reading her book, Bamboozled by Jesus. In that book, she also talked and touched on the importance of timing and being on God's time, actually. And then there's also Darius Daniels, and I'm sure there are plenty more I could name, but those are some of the ones that stand out to me right now. And I'm sure you can probably think of some people too. But even the assignments that may not seem obviously related to success have a sensitivity to time. We tend to think about the big things like career and success or marriage, but that's because we're thinking from a self-centered frame of mind. When God gives us assignments, they are to benefit more than just us. He has people connected to us in mind. I'll give you a prime example right now. So, God tells someone to call their grandmother and start repairing the relationship, right? But the person keeps procrastinating it and putting it off and justifying it by saying, well, I'm volunteering in the church and I'm helping with cleanup after church services, and I called my aunt and I made amends with her, and I practice forgiveness with my spouse every day. So I can hold off a little while till I feel like it. I don't feel like talking to my grandmother. I don't feel like forgiving her. I don't feel like dealing with her. And so they never call the grandmother, right? Now, a few months later, they find out that she passed away. What they didn't realize is that they didn't have time to keep procrastinating. They didn't realize the sensitivity of the assignment. They thought it was just about them. They didn't realize it was also about her. Because what they didn't know is that their phone call to their grandmother was going to lead to the reconciliation that they actually both needed in order to heal. What they didn't know, which she or didn't realize, is that through repairing the relationship with her grandmother, they would have inspired their grandmother to start going to church. And what they didn't know is that when they did inspire her to start going to church, she would have given her life to Christ and passed away a few weeks after that church service. But they don't know the timing. And a lot of times we make assumptions thinking people are saved or thinking that people are doing well, and we don't understand why it keeps coming up in our hearts and mind to, oh, I should call that person, or oh, I should reach out to that person, or oh, I should check up on that person. Listen to that voice. You don't know what's going on, and you don't know how you could change the trajectory of someone else's life just by being obedient to the assignment that is placed in your heart and in your hands. It's not just about you. It's not. It's also about people who are connected to you. Everything in this life is about other people as well, not just you. There's so much we don't know and can't anticipate happening. COVID-19 just catastrophically reminded us of that. So, loves, we do not have time to waste. And one of the biggest ways I've seen people waste time is catering to their insecurities. Catering to your insecurities is like putting a band-aid on a broken limb. You're not solving the actual problem. And I have been guilty of this though. Coming back to the title of this podcast is Credentials Won't Silence Insecurities. That is the title of this episode. And this title was birthed out of an actual situation, as I mentioned. And the situation was one in which God thankfully redirected me from wasting time and money. Because nobody likes wasting money. Because I was being so busy doing something that he didn't even ask me to do. And I had the right part in mind in doing it. I was trying to be a better version of myself. But I was doing that instead of focusing on what he did tell me to do. So, alright, here's the key. Basically, what had happened was, while I was in my office at my internship, I was researching this life coaching program that I had been considering it for a while. And it was $2,100, and classes were offered on weekends, which meant I wouldn't have to worry about it interfering with my internship hours. And at that point in my life, I was really fixated on making myself more lucrative, boost my resume, make myself more desirable as a professional and whatnot. I had just got that refund check from student loans, so I was like, all right, we are going to use that to help pay for this $2,100 and then get the certification, all the little other additional fees. Now, that day when I was at my internship, something kept telling me to mention this decision to my supervisor / mentor, Dr. SOS. You guys may have remembered I mentioned her in episode 1. But nevertheless, I just kept shrugging off that voice because I was like, it's no reason to. Like, no, I don't want to. Already, my mind is made up. I'm just going to like keep it pushing. So I made up my mind that as soon as 5 p.m. hit, I was going to hop in my car and make my way home in time to log into the first meeting and submit my first payment for the program. However, later that afternoon, while we're in the office, Dr. SOS comes into my office to check in on me and say hello, per usual, with her kind and caring self. But this time, she sat down, which at this point in our relationship together, that was a bit odd to me. And so she sits down and she asks me, so what are your plans for this evening? Up to that point, she had never asked me that before. Like, she checks in on me on like how my day went or how my sessions with clients was, but not like that type of question. And she knew also that at 5 p.m., unless I had to stay an extra hour to get some notes done, I'm usually straight out that door to get this hour and a half drive over with so that I can get enough rest to be back in the morning at 5 a.m. doing this all over again. So that was like a little off to me. Now, initially, I just answered, oh, I'm just, gonna be going home today. I have a meeting, that's all. And she's like, oh, okay, what's the meeting for? Never has she asked me. Like, she's not like a nosy person. She doesn't pry. Normally, her response to that would have been, oh, okay. Well, drive safe or something like that, and change subject to something else that happened with clients. But no, not this time. So all of this was so out of the norm. I couldn't help but just roll my eyes in my imagination like, okay, Lord, what are you doing? Fine. All right, cool. So I ended up telling her about my plan with full excitement because I had made up in my mind I was going to do it one way or another regardless. So I told her about the plan to do the life coaching program, and I am actually so glad that I did, and I'm so grateful that I did. In retrospect, I'm able to say that. So we talked about what led me to make that decision, my rationale, the cost, everything. And with so much kindness and genuine care and just a little bit of sternness, she offered some stern/gentle redirection and perspective on this decision I had made. She brought to my attention the fact that, number one, I'm only a few months away from getting my doctorate, a degree that holds a whole heck of a lot more weight and credibility and reverence than the life coaching certificate I would have gotten. Number two, she brought to my attention that the training I received throughout my time and experiences in various settings under different types of professionals with all different types of credentials and skill sets has already encompassed what I would learn in a life coaching program. And that was even confirmed by the instructor whom I had reached out to about the program in the first place, but I ignored her because I was like, whatever, I still want to sign up for your program. Thanks for your feedback, but no thanks. So, sometimes you gotta hear it from somebody else before it sticks. And then number three, the money I was about to spend on this program was actually rent, gas, and other bills and emergency money for the future, which I did end up needing literally a couple months down the line after that day. And then number four, she brought to my attention that I was about to take my mind and body through even more wear and tear by completely eliminating any time for self-care or recovery at all. Because literally the bulk of my self-care and recovery is done on my weekends, and this program was completely on weekends. So I actually want to pause right here because self-care is so important. Yes, I'm talking about time and assignments and all that right now, but I want to pause here for a second because this is actually a reminder I had to get again, and I'm so thankful that God puts people in my life to give me reminders of things that he had already told me. But sometimes, just as humans, we forget. Literally, the other day, over the weekend, I was just like really stressed, and I had been noticing this pattern of like every weekend, just as Friday evening hits when I get off work, I've been feeling like really pressured and like anxious, and I wasn't necessarily realizing that it was anxiety. I just realized that it was like the discomfort that I was feeling. I wasn't quite able to name it, and I called my friend to kind of like press, like, yo, bruh, I am like struggling on weekends. Like, I can't sleep. I kept thinking that it was a sleep issue, and this is why it's so important to listen to your body and to take those times to slow down. And I say that, I teach my clients that all the time, but even sometimes the teachers need to be reminded. And so I'm like, yeah, bro, like, I feel really burnt out and tired and drained, but I've been sleeping, but then I still feel tired and drained. And we like talked for a couple minutes trying to problem solve, like, what is going on? Are you like taking vitamins? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you sleeping? Are you not sleeping? Maybe it's just, jet lag from all the commuting and blah, blah. And then he asked me, are you tired physically, or is it that you're tired emotionally and mentally? And I hadn't even thought about that. Like, that just wasn't even on my mind. I was just so focused on, if I can just get myself to go to sleep for a little bit of time, enough to bulk, like get myself to go back, like get back up and get to doing all the things I need to do, then everything will be fine. What I have forgotten up until that point is his question like triggered this series of spiraling, like one thing after another was coming up. And I was thankful for it, because after we talked about it, it was like, okay, that is resonating with me. Just hearing that question of, am I tired emotionally and mentally? And then also spiritually. And I was like, yeah. And instantly I like started crying, because I'm like, oh, I do. Like, once I was able to tap into that, I'm like, there it is. It's right there. And so I go and sit in my like little meditation space, and I'm like just sitting with it, and I start like just sitting there with myself, paying attention to my body, paying attention to what's coming up, praying, all of that stuff. And I realized that it had been months since I've done any type of real self-care on the weekends, because for the last like the 2 to 3 months I've been on grind mode every single weekend. And then on top of that, I wasn't able, like, my one little self-care thing that I was being strict about, like every month, get, mani pedi, full set, whatever, get a little massage, all that. But these past couple of months, I haven't been able to do that for an array of reasons. And so I just wasn't making time for it. And then even like other things that I was typically making time for on weekends, I just hadn't been doing, like having fun with friends. I just haven't been doing any of that stuff, like working out, but working out was becoming more of an assignment for me. So I'm realizing all these things, and I'm like, dang. And it's funny because once I was able to take a sit back and pay attention to that, I realized, wow, God has actually been talking to me for a minute about resting. But, sometimes depending on the mindset you're in, you yourself don't realize the messages that you're missing, right? So here, let me explain that a bit. I have been seeing and hearing a lot of videos and messages about time. And I had also been seeing a lot of videos and messages about, grind and like getting things done and all this other stuff, right? Okay. So that's what I was paying attention to. However, when I took those few seconds, those few moments to sit down and like meditate and actually reflecting back, and some of those videos and messages started, like, the Holy Spirit just started bringing them back to mind. And then I started seeing the parts of those same videos and messages that weren't just about grind, but also about rest. And I was like, dang, I completely blocked that part out and only focused on the grind part, and only focused on the, like, you don't have time to waste part. So I had that epiphany and had to sit my whole behind down this past weekend and actually be intentional about self-care and recovery and restoration and fun. And I was able to kind of like start, doing the work to repair my heart and my mind and my body, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all of that, so that I can be more effective. And I bring this up because it's so important for us to take those moments to allow for self-care and recovery, right? Now, coming back to the story, when I was about to make this decision to do this life coaching, I was already being stretched thin by the collective stress and strain I was feeling from a full-time internship, 40 hours plus, sometimes plus per week, pro bono clinical work outside of my internship, 3-hour total daily commuting every single day except Saturday and Sunday, and then researching for my dissertation, running a nonprofit, juggling finances, writing a book, and being a full-time single shawarma mama to 2 little terrorists. And if you don't think having 2 dogs is a full-time job, baby, you better think again, because it is. I love them, but they are stressful sometimes. Now, adding the life coaching program to my already jam-packed schedule really would have been the straw to break the camel's back, and I didn't realize that because my weekends were already my only time to do any type of like self-care, fun, and recovery. And this life coaching program was about to like completely evaporate all of that. So in retrospect, I thank God that he sent Dr. SOS to interrupt my plan that day and to ask me like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? And I appreciate it so much. And I say God because I do believe he is the one that orchestrated that. And I've built up a history of recognizing his voice and how he tends to move and speak in my life. So I give credit where credit is due, period. Now, are there times when we give God credit for things he didn't do, say, or orchestrate? Of course. We're human. We make mistakes. We can't be perfect. One of my favorite comedians, Dion Cole, actually has a really pretty funny joke about it when he was saying, sometimes we give God credit for things that he don't want credit for. You guys should check out his stand-up. It's actually hilarious. But the point is that this wasn't one of those times. So give credit where credit is. Nevertheless, after our conversation, I ended up not going home at 5 p.m. I actually ended up staying behind for almost 2 hours just talking to Dr. SOS and her husband, Minister Jason, about purpose, faith, and wisdom, and calling, identity, discernment, and having confidence in who and what God called me to be and do. It was the most fruitful, precious use of my time ever. And it didn't cost me $2,100. It was free. But later that night, as I was driving home, it didn't stop there. I'm driving home and I started having one of my usual conversations with God. Listen, don't even try to understand it. Me and God got a different kind of relationship thing going on over here, okay? You're not going to find this on any prayer book or hymnal. We keep it $110, and I talk to him as my actual friend and father, okay? So I was asking, God, what is going on with me? Who are you even calling me to be? Am I really doing enough? Because I don't feel like it. I don't feel like I'm doing enough. If not the life coaching, is there something else that I need to be doing? What's up, bro? Because I really just want to be and do my best in what you're calling me to do and be, and I need to know that I'm doing that. Maybe it wasn't life coaching. Maybe there's something else you I'm having a whole tantrum and just ranting, right? And I'm sitting there after my rant, calm down, sitting there silently because I just got everything off my chest. And after a couple moments, I hear God say so clearly and straightforwardly, them credentials are not going to silence your insecurities. Child, I almost stopped the whole car. I was so offended and defensive all at the same time. Excuse me? insecure. I'm past all that. I'm big, bold, and brave. I'm not insecure. Who are you calling insecure? Oh, right. Well, you are God, but nah. I'm not insecure. 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 And literally, the more I said it, shaking my head and everything, the more I started feeling that little girl deep on the inside of me starting to speak up. The one plagued with insecurities from years ago. And the more I thought about it, the more my eyes started to just water, and I was just a mess. I was a mess, y'all. And I just couldn't help it. I had to let the walls come down, let the tears fall, and that truth just started speaking. And once again, as I had done several times before, I had to address the unhealed parts of me that this time were trying to disguise themselves under the veil of credentials and perfectionism. And when I got home that night, I prayed a familiar prayer like, Lord, heal my heart. Reveal to me any part of my heart or my mind that needs to be exposed or healed and resurrendered or resubmitted back to you. I prayed and I processed. For me, that was through art and journaling. That's just how I process things. I talked to God and I talked to my therapist because I knew whatever I let slide now would haunt me later. It would find a way to come back up, so might as well just go ahead and address it now while it's at the surface. So loves, remember this. Confront your demons now. Don't wait till they grow legs and muscles and pumping steroids and start running your life. Confront the insecurities now. Don't wait until you see them manifesting in your sons and your daughters. Hold yourself accountable now. You are responsible for what you know. So, if you know something is an issue for you or a trigger or a sore spot, start doing the work now to heal it. Is it always going to be one and done? No. I just said that through my own experience and story. My insecurities still come up from time to time, and I have to address them. That little girl in me that's afraid and, doubtful of herself, she comes up sometimes. And I address her. And I work with her. You might have to remind that Goliath what your slingshot do. You might have to remind that insecurity who your God is, and remind it that God lives in you, so it has no authority or place within you. Baby, let them know that not only were you fearfully and wonderfully made, but you were made with a purpose. You were designed for a purpose. Allow my story today to be a warning, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, but do not allow your insecurities to have you jumping through hoops that God never even assigned to you. We live in a society that is constantly pressuring us to do more, but rarely ask the question if the more that you are doing is even in alignment with your calling and purpose that God assigned to you. Is it even what God asked you to do or told you to do? You can have more degrees than a thermometer and still be unproductive and unfruitful. And adding credentials behind your name won't silence your insecurities because they're still going to come up. I'm about to have a whole doctorate and they still come up. Those internal feelings of inadequacy, shame, fear, you name it, they're gonna come up. So address them, confront them. Don't try to cover them up or hide behind other things to distract yourself from them. Here's just a few other things that you can do to start actually putting this into steps. Number one, talk back to voices of insecurity. What does that look like? When thoughts come up in your mind of I'm not enough, or I'm not good enough, I'm not intelligent enough, I don't have the strategy, I don't have the skill set, talk back with, actually, no, I do. I have learned that skill. I have been practicing that skill. I learned that here. I am qualified. Grow in scripture. God said that I have a sound mind, so I am capable of this. You have to learn how to speak back to the voices that are popping up in your head, not just letting them go ahead and run rampant. Don't sit with the thought, oh yeah, I'm inadequate. No. If that thought of inadequacy pops up, you pop back with, no, I am more than enough. Number 2, stop comparing yourself to others. I feel like that's a lot of what gets people in trouble with this idea of like whether or not they're enough, and just like struggling with insecurities. Social media was literally the worst thing possible. It is the worst thing possible because people are only posting their highlight reels and their best version of themselves. And people forget that. They see how well people are doing and they think that, oh my gosh, I'm falling apart, I'm failing, I'm not doing enough. No. Are you where you were assigned? Are you doing what you were told and instructed and created and designed to do? Then you are right on track. Don't compare yourself to other people. One of the things I had to cut back on is listening to other podcasts when I started this podcast, because I would notice myself comparing, am I doing a long enough podcast? Is my sound quality as clear as them? Those are things that I'm going to work on as I get to that point. But this is the space that I'm in right now. God loves to see a work begin. That has been my anchoring scripture throughout this whole process. God loves to see a work begin. He loves seeing all the little parts that you start to pull together. He loves seeing the excitement that you have when you first start working on something that he actually has called for you to do, or gifted you to do, or placed in your heart to do. You can't compare yourself to other people. You can't do it because you aren't them. And you weren't designed to be them, and you weren't designed to be on the same path as them. Athletes, one of the things that we constantly tell our athletic clients that come in for therapy is how to challenge and address the comparison demon. That's just what this group has decided to call it. It's literally confronting the part of you that feels pulled to see, oh, how am I matched up with this person? And it's really difficult with athletes because your whole career is based upon being better than the person you're lined across the field with, or on the other side of that court. But you have to learn how to reel that in and appreciate your uniqueness and your gifts and your talents and your strengths. You have to learn how to appreciate your qualities. The third part, which kind of goes seamlessly with this, speak life into yourself. This isn't just speaking back to your insecurities, but this is speaking positivity and courage into yourself, whether an insecurity is present or not. You know the song, sometimes you have to encourage yourself. I can't sing, but you know the song, right? There are times when you're going to have to encourage yourself. Compliment yourself. Stop waiting to receive one from someone else who is going to forget your name by tomorrow. Practice positive affirmations. What positive affirmations are statements that you may not necessarily actually believe at the time. But the point is that you start speaking them out loud every day and practicing them to the point that you start believing them and they start feeling more believable. Granted, you can start off small with, I am smart. I have nice hair. I have nice nails. You can start off small and then build up on that. Build up to, I love the way my body is formed. I love my curves. I love the way my voice fluctuates depending on the situation I'm in. I love my tone. I love how my complexion looks different depending on the weather. recognize the things about yourself that are so beautiful. One of the things that stand out to me is I was in this biggest battle of my life for like the longest time over my gap. Half of me wanted to love it, half of me wanted to hate it. And that was primarily because it was often something I was teased about growing up. Constantly being teased about my gap. And as I got older, the playing field started to kind of balance out because I would also recognize people who actually thought my gap was cute and would compliment it. The problem with that was if the compliment wasn't there, I no longer believed it was something to like about myself. And it led me to trying to change that. And then that whole process led me to even more distress and disliking myself even more. What I had to come to realize is how to appreciate what I feel and see about myself. I love my gap, and I had to learn how to love it completely, and love my smile, and love my almost dimples, love my curly hair, and love on myself, and speak positivity over myself. I had to practice the affirmations. Sometimes you see in like the movies where people post like the little stickers on the windows or their mirrors, and it says like, you are beautiful, you are great, you're strong, you're intelligent, you are brave, you are thriving, you are successful, all these other things, right? I actually full-heartedly support it. Why? Because I've seen it work. Not just for myself, but I've also seen it work for clients. I've seen that small intervention change my clients' lives around faster than medication. So that's why I recommend them. And then lastly, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you must make time to self-care and pause. Take time to not just keep going on this continuous hamster wheel of next thing to do, and stop and pause. Because what pausing actually does is give you an opportunity to reassess your strategy, because the playing field is constantly changing. Our world is constantly changing. So there are times where you're going to have to slow down and reevaluate your strategy and your plan. Maybe there's some things that you need to tweak or change about it, right? And then also pausing to give yourself time to recover. Your brain needs time to recover, not just sleep, but actually doing something that is restoring, like sitting in silence, is actually very soothing and helpful to your nervous system. Listening to certain tunes and sound waves is very calming and nurturing to your nervous system. Listening to a guided imagery recording. They're free online. Just type in guided imagery, and you can even specify if you want a male's voice or a female's voice. Try it out. It actually is so helpful. If you struggle going to sleep, maybe that's a time where you want to try it. Doing a body scan. That was something that I did after my conversation with my friend about like what's going on with me and all this stress and like anxiety on weekends. I went when I was doing my meditation, and I sat down and I did what we call in teaching therapy is a body scan. And what that is, you start either with your head or the soles of your feet, and you notice each part of your body very slowly, each muscle, the soles of your feet, the ball of your feet, your ankle, your calf muscle, your knee, your thighs, your hips. Very slowly just going and paying attention to how does that feel, noticing if there's any tension in your body, any parts of discomfort. And I didn't realize until I did that body scan how much tension was in my shoulders and neck. I didn't even realize the pain I had actually been harboring in my back, because I was just so used to it at this point, because I was just on go every single day, on go. So I had to pause, and I had to slow down. I had to reevaluate how was my body feeling. What did my body need right now? My body needed love. My body needed attention. It needed some compassion. I realized this might be TMI, but I'm gonna go here because I feel like somebody can relate to this, and maybe you can pay more attention to this moving forward. I didn't even realize that the one thing that I love more than anything is being in water. So I love showers. I love showers because I love to be in water. It's so it's amazing to me. Yet, I didn't realize until that day after I did that like session of just meditating, I'm like, okay, you know, I'm gonna like actually do the recommendations that my friend recommended. And one of the last things I did after I took my little Chihuahua babies for a walk, I came back and I took a shower. And in the middle of the shower, now that my mind was heightened to be a little bit more aware, self-aware, I didn't realize I had been rushing through my showers to just get it done. All right, let's go. Next thing. All right, on. And I had to pause, like, why am I rushing right now? I don't need to go to work right now. I'm not late for anything. Why am I rushing through this activity that used to be so beautiful for me and so peaceful? Now it's a stressor. Ugh. I hate it when I realized that, but I was thankful that I did realize it. And so that's why it's important to take these moments. I would even say daily, to pause and just reassess. Not just reassess yourself and what you're doing and your goals and the strategy that you're taking, but also reassess, how is your body doing? How is your heart doing? How is your mind doing? Really, how is it? And you might need to sit a few minutes with that. And also maybe even starting a friend group where you guys check in with each other and ask the question, not just how are you doing, because we've become robotic in our way of responding with, I'm doing good, I'm alright. No, how's your heart? How's your soul? We gotta switch it up a little bit to draw people to actually like stop and get, taken back a minute so they can actually assess, like, how am I really? And I want you guys to not just make this a one-time thing or New Year's resolution. Make it a lifetime activity that is a part of you. Make it a lifestyle. To check in with yourself, pause, to self-care, to strategize, to talk back to voices of insecurity, to challenge tendencies to compare yourself, to speak life into yourself, and to practice positive affirmations. Don't waste any more of your time in a lane you were not created to be in the first place. Focus on where God placed you. Focus on the things He placed in your hands. He's trusting you with it. You got this. I know sometimes you don't think you do, but you got it. You gonna get through it. You can do this. Don't give up. Don't give up. If you feel like you need to give up, maybe that's your mind and body trying to tell you that you need to take a break, that you need to sit down and breathe and assess how your body, your spine, your heart, your chest, your legs is feeling, because we harbor so much tension in our body that we don't even realize. Shakiness that we have learned to just ignore. Pause. Take some deep breaths. When was the last time you just sat in silence and breathed? Try it out. Listen to what your body needs. Not every assignment is yours. Sometimes we have a tendency of picking up someone else's homework. Focus on what He placed in your hands, and focus on the strategy and the timing He's given you. Don't compare your timing of your assignment to the timing of someone else's. Maybe this is the season that you bloom. Maybe this is the season that you're planted. And the only way to figure that out is to go back again to the one who designed you with your precious self. All right? And if nothing else, until next time, remember, faith helps.